So you're in this season of, in your mind, just so overwhelmed. And I think we forget that it'll change so fast. Like in 1 year, you might be a completely different kind of overwhelmed. And so maybe your brain just needs like a year or whatever it might be. Don't think that this is how you're going to always feel. I think you just need a little time. I think maybe you're in a particularly overwhelming season and you're forgetting that that changes, because it does. It just changes all the time.
My name is Lisa, mother of 8 and creator of the blog and YouTube channel Farmhouse on Boone. On this podcast, I like to talk about simplifying your life so you can live out your priorities. I help you learn how to cook from scratch and decorate on a budget through this podcast and my courses, Simple Sourdough and the Simple Sewing series. I also help people reach their goals from home through my business course, YouTube Success Academy. I will leave links to these resources in the show notes and description box below. Now let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the Simple Farmhouse Life podcast. Today I'm going to be doing another solo episode talking through our build and progress that's happening there, talking about the pregnancy, answering some of your frequently asked questions, giving you basically a summer life update for our family and our projects, which are a lot right now. So first, just to talk a bit about the build. We are fully in the middle of framing right now. Now, when this episode comes out, I imagine that framing will be mostly done because as of recording, they're already working on framing out the second level. Some advice I received from anybody who's ever built, because I've talked to a lot of people who have built, whether it's a custom home or it's, any kind of home, whether it's a barn dominium, a farmhouse style, a modern style, the advice has been the same: to go often. And that's tricky, but I was really prepared for it in this season. I knew that when this build really got underway, which it took forever to get fully underway, we were supposed to, in my mind, when we bought our property last April, so a year ago, we were going to be starting fully building in November, but then just like the weather and the people who were our builders, they were finishing up another project. I think this is just like setting us up for how this whole thing is, which everybody warned me. It didn't really get fully underway until springtime. So that's when we started working on the foundations and just the whole ball really got rolling. And we are very much in the swing of things right now with framing. But we knew, based on all the people that we've talked to who have built, that we needed to carve out time, even though we are hiring a general contractor, even though we aren't planning to do a ton of the work ourselves, we're going to step in. There's like certain things throughout this that we want to do. Like, for example, we picked up a bunch of antique doors and they're going in all throughout the house, and we need to do some refinishing on them, but I want to wait until they're placed so that we can decide, okay, this room will be this color, we should leave this one wood, or we should paint this one this color. So we can't really do that ahead of time, but we plan to do all of that, like adding the hardware to the doors that we source from either vintage or House of Antique hardware, painting them, sanding them, refinishing them. We plan to paint some of the wood floors because we are doing the enclosed porch look off the back of the house to create a narrative that this is an old house that's been added onto. We are going to be running wooden porch flooring that will be painted, just like traditional old homes where the porches are painted. We will carry that in the rooms that are in that old porch area, and then of course the front porch as well. So Luke plans to do a lot of that painting, and then we're going to be painting the barn. He plans to do a lot of that. So there's stuff that we're going to be doing, but for the most part, the build is being done by builders and a general contractor. We're not doing any of the wiring or the drywall or, the framing or anything like that. But we knew even still that we should be very closely involved with this project because we're the ones who over the last year have designed this house, have just every little minuscule detail. We've, shifted walls this way and we've opened this up a little bit and we've added this window. And so now the follow through on that is to be at the build site and make sure that we're there to answer any questions. The builder comes into this with basically a set of blueprints, and that's about the only information. And what I have noticed about contractors over lots of years of renovations, never building, but lots of renovations, and from stories that others have told, is they have a job to do and they are on a time schedule. So they're out there with their crew. They run into something that's a bit confusing on the blueprint. Like, okay, well, if this isn't framed this way, how are we fitting in this window? And instead of stopping a whole entire day, going home, and then not doing anything that day, they make assumptions. They come up with what they think would be the best solution. And they might not realize how important a certain detail was to you. And they figure, we'll just make this work. And I've seen it over and over and over again with so many contractors, just little tiny things, like just a tiny example. And then I could just go on and on. We did a renovation in one of our bathrooms, and I had a piece that I wanted for the windowsill. And the contractor, and I gave it to the contractor, and this was going to be the piece as we were framing out a window to make it match the historic house and the rest of the house. This will be the piece for the windowsill. And he is used to, in his head, the size of windowsills. I assumed, without even thinking that I needed to specify, that this whole piece would be used for the windowsill. But instead, in his mind, he assumed she wants a windowsill. And typically, windowsills are this deep. Therefore, he cut it. And just those types of little things happen. Like in our kitchen renovation in our last house, we did the apron front farmhouse high back vintage sink. And we had to have a cabinet custom made to house the sink because since it's high back, the cabinet sits lower than counter height because it also comes, out of the counter. It's not just dropped in. And so to be the appropriate height for doing dishes, it needed to be lower. Well, there was a little rusty spot around the bottom of the sink that I thought was charming, but the contractor thought, oh, she'll want to cover this up. So without asking, made like a lip on the cabinet so that it would sit in. I saw it and I was like, that's not what I wanted. Like, I want to see the full sink. Little tiny things like this happen constantly. And the sooner you're there to see it, the less likely they're going to have to undo an entire day of work, which I believe happens on the homeowner's dime. I mean, it's kind of hard to tell with building because it's not like every single itemized hour is given. So it's important to be there. We had an issue similar to this already. And when we showed up, it was not the perfect time to show up, but it also could have been a ton worse because what we saw, what we wanted differently than what they assumed that they made work, they were about to do on another entire very long wall. And we caught it. And so it was, yes, there was a few things that had to be corrected, but then the majority of that, if we had shown up the next day, just would have, we would have had to redo entire walls, like several, or, 2 or 3 walls. And so we would have had to have the discussion of, is this worth it? Like all the material, all the time that went into framing that out, is it worth undoing it and redoing it? And I hope that we continue to find these types of things. I put something like this on my DMs, or I put something like this on my Instagram stories. I shared just progress. And I said, we've been out here every single day, just trying to be there to answer any questions the builders might have. This XYZ is what's happened so far. And I had so many DMs of we had this happen. And it was just big stuff that you would think wouldn't happen. Okay. I had to pause because my husband came in with a phone call and it was our builder. So this, like I said, we've made plans to be invested in this, even though we're hiring a general contractor, all of that. If we're trying to build this house with character and all this stuff, there's a lot of little things that go into it. And I made our builder this packet with all of the doors, because we sourced antique and vintage doors that were from the time period that this house was supposed to be built, because we're doing this new old house thing. And so we had to place them. We have, weird size doors. We have some skinny ones that were for the closets that are, nothing is standard in old stuff. So the doors that go in the closets are One is 77 by 24, one's 72 by 24. Actually, two are 72 by 24, and one is 73 by 28. So he called Luke to confirm, do you really want doors that are only 6 feet tall? Which I understand, because that's as tall as like the average adult male. Like my husband's just under 6 feet. So I think what would happen, we already kind of have shown our builders that, okay, we're serious about this. Like we really do want to build this new old house. We realize there's some extra considerations, extra effort, because there's, to make this packet with all of the door sizes and where they go was, first of all, a challenge. But then running into things that just aren't standard. Like, we're going to make this door opening 24 by 72. Like, are you sure you want that? And at this point, we've been out there enough, communicating enough that he knows I should probably call her, even though I think this is not something she would want. I'm not going to make any assumptions. So anyways, what I was going to say before taking that call was, I think unless I had talked to a bunch of other people who have built a house, I would think that, you just give them the blueprints, you give them the measurements of your doors, your windows, all the things that you want, and then they just build it. But it's amazing, like now that I'm in this and it's very underway, how many little things are like, well, but if that is this, then what about this, that you think were kind of already ironed out that aren't necessarily. And so it with such a project, it makes sense that there's going to be these questions throughout it. It's not going to be so straightforward. And that's why we've kind of figured that this year our brains would be devoted to this build, and we're not being hands off about it. We do want to be involved in it because we plan to live here, indefinitely. That's probably the goal. And so, and maybe even our kids will inherit this house. And so we're trying to take it seriously. But man, what an adventure it is. And it's just getting started, honestly. So I'll keep you all along. I know most of you probably aren't building. Maybe you have no plans to build. I actually had no plans to build at all. In the last year and a half, it became pretty apparent that we were going to be doing it. So that's when I've really started seeking advice and listening to people who are building. And so maybe you'll just come back to this later if that should ever be presented to you, that you'll ever end up building. One question I had in the Q&A was about enclosing a porch, because in our new old house design, one of the concepts I brought to Brent Hull that I heard somewhere else or saw somewhere else that I wanted his help on actually figuring out how to do was taking like a main house, basically like a square or rectangle main house, and then adding on additions to make it look like the house grew over time. So adding on a sun porch, adding on a back porch that was a back porch that mirrored the front. And then at some point it got windows so that the homeowners could use it for more square footage. Of course, ours isn't really growing over time, so it's just something that we're doing right now. But to really seal the deal on that look, we have to choose the right finishes. We have to make sure that it looks like there are posts supporting the roof there. It, look like it was actually a porch that was enclosed, which is more challenging than I even expected. Taking a quick break to tell you about today's sponsor, Azure Standard. You all know that I love stocking our pantry, our fridge, and our freezer with high quality items. Things like organic hard white wheat berries for baking bread, soft wheat berries for cookies and muffins, and a variety of different flours and grains and beans, whole food ingredients for my pantry, grass-fed butter, cheese, raw cheese, cream for the refrigerator, quality organic fruits and vegetables for the freezer. Azure Standard has it all. And what I love about it, and the reason why I started going to an Azure Standard pickup way back before I had a podcast or a blog, was because there were things that I wanted to start using in my own kitchen. I wanted to start milling my own grains. I wanted to find grass-fed butter before Kerrygold was a widespread thing, but I couldn't find them locally, and I didn't have the bandwidth to make all of my own butter. I didn't have a dairy cow because we didn't have a homestead or a farm, but I still wanted to focus on that sourcing. And so I sought out Azure Standard to fill that need, to fill that gap. And no matter where you live, you can do the exact same thing. It works like a co-op model. So you and all of the like-minded people in your area who also want these quality ingredients in their homes all go to a drop location. A big truck comes in and all of your stuff comes off the truck once a month. There's likely already a drop location near you. So you can go on the Azure Standard website, AzureStandard.com, and find a drop location that's already in your area that you can already be a part of going on. They're meeting somewhere in your area. And if they're not, you can start one, but most likely there's already going to be one, and you place your order with that drop, show up on the designated date, and get all of these awesome goods into your own home. Azure Standard is offering 15% off your first order of $100 or more to a drop location with the code SIMPLE15. So head to AzureStandard.com. Use the code SIMPLE15 if you've ever been on the fence about trying Azure Standard. This is a great time to do it. Place a big order and get that discount, and meet some like-minded people in your area who also are focused on health, prioritizing high-quality ingredients with Azure Standard. Okay, so someone asked, we are enclosing a ground-level stone porch on our 225-year-old home. Our goal is to use this area as a greenhouse. I'm trying to source wooden windows and stable or glass doors with actual wooden mullions and plain glass, not double paned. What resources are you finding for these types of items? Your build is outstanding and your style so closely matches mine. I know any advice would be wonderful. Congrats on baby number 9. And this is Lee from Old Tavern Farm. Your house sounds amazing. And I so wish we could have bought a property that already had an old house on it. But here where we are, there's not a huge appreciation for old homes, and it's also very rural, so there just are so few. And we are also really, really picky on where our location was. We didn't want to go an hour this way or an hour that way. We had a very little radius of where we wanted to be. And I thought some homesteads with more land at some point would come up, but it just never did. And when I drive around, I don't even see any. So unfortunately, that wasn't going to happen. But to answer your question for your lovely old stone porch, which sounds amazing, as far as the windows go, I shared on the design video that I partnered with Brent Hull, who studied historic architecture and specializes in restoration and also in designing homes that have classic character. He also has a window company called 100 Year Window, and these windows are designed to last 100 years. They are built like the windows of old, except for that they are new. So a lot of people with historic properties use these windows to replace the windows that need replacing without losing the historic accuracy, the integrity, all of the things that it's so important to do when you have an old house to maintain that character. So we are partnering with him on the windows. So these windows that will be in this windowed in porch are casement windows. So instead of opening, like double hung, they'll open out. They have beautiful hardware on them. I just cannot wait to see them. Once everything's all framed in, we'll put the windows in, and I can't wait to see them. So that would probably be a great place for you to look for the windows for your project, because they can work with your dimensions, which are probably all kinds of, not standard basically in an old house. And then you also asked about the doors. I would say, as far as what we're doing for doors, we're doing almost exclusively old doors. So just looking on Etsy, looking on different architectural salvage websites. There are several across the country that will ship. You can drive there. I still have some to source, actually. There are several doors that we're placing that I already placed and gave the dimensions to the builder. But then there are some that I thought, we bought a lot of doors. Let's just see how this even works out before I go buying every last door. but I'm telling him just to frame out sort of a matching size. And then I'm going to retroactively go find doors that fit the openings. I can't tell you yet which idea was better, if it was better to buy them all first and then have them specially framed, or if it's a better idea to frame them and then cut or find doors that fit. Honestly, I don't know. And I will let you know, because I'd say if I went through and counted, we're probably at about half and half on doors throughout the house that we did it one way and that we're going to plan to do the other. I just got kind of overwhelmed in my brain with how much stuff I was buying for the house that was just sitting in storage. And I'm like, hopefully this works. Hopefully they're not going to tell me, oh, we can't like frame those weird sizes. Seems like that's working out, but we haven't actually put them in there yet. So I'm still a little hesitant. I'm just going to do the rest of them this way. I'll let you know. But all that to say, you have something you're already working with here, and you can go search just on the World Wide Web with your dimensions. And even if they're not perfect, but they're close, they can be trimmed down. Some things are just better when they're actual antiques. Some things, it makes way more sense just to source new with something that has sort of an antique look to it. And some things are better, heavier, nicer, actually old. I'm kind of going through this too with flooring. Thought about getting reclaimed wood floors. And I found a place down in, I think it was Georgia, something like that. And they had 4,000 square feet of heart pine out of an old garment factory. Sounded promising, but I spoke on the phone with the guy and I was like, okay, tell me the truth. Like, how thick are these? Can these be sanded, 5 more times throughout their life? Like, if we're to install these and say, we're going to sand them, finish them, say 10 years from now, we want the floors to look beautiful again. We sand them again. 10 years from now, we want to do it again. Can we do that with these old floors, or have they already been sanded several times? Because sometimes you'll have floors, like in this house, for example, these floors were at some point covered with carpet a long time ago. And it appears as if nobody ever well, I'm sure originally they were sanded, but they weren't sanded several times. They have visibly no damage. They just were covered with carpet in perfect condition all these years. And if you were to salvage these floors, they would be like new, really. And so I wasn't sure if that's something you can kind of find, but he was like, you're not going to want this. Like, it's already 5/8 thick, which if you buy it new, it's going to be 3/4 or more. They definitely have, visible damage because they were walked on for X amount of years. And I'm like, see, that's probably one of those places where, unless it's going to go on the porch areas and the attic where we're going to paint, would make more sense to just get it new. Whereas the frame for the barn, we shared a video on our YouTube channel of that going up, the timber frame barn. For me, the character of that, the hand-hewn beams and all of that, made more sense to be old. So I'm kind of trying to find the balance in all of this. Like, what should be new? What should be old? I think doors are one of those things, because when you come down to it, it's just a rectangular piece of wood that's either really heavy, or modern doors seem to be really light. They have certain details to them, panels and all this stuff. And so I think once we cover them with some fresh stain, some fresh paint, it will make more sense to have the old doors. But yeah, I'll fill you guys all in later on how this all worked out. And I'm sure I'll have plenty of things I'm like, yep, wish we would have done this, or wish we would have done that. So for you, Lee, from Old Tavern Farm, I would recommend probably new on the windows, but salvaged for the door. Ooh, this is a fun question. If you and Luke could get away for 2 weeks, what would be your dream destination? How would you spend it? Relaxing, exploring, and seeing everything? We would maybe go out of the country. That's something that we've never done. I just got a passport just because there are certain times when it's like, oh, we could do this or that. And I'm like, well, I'd have to wait this many weeks for a passport. I still have no plans to go anywhere, but I could now. So probably, I honestly don't know. I have not even given that a whole lot of thought, but I think that if that was put on the table, I'm sure we would come up with something. Now, we have had a few times in the last several years where we've gotten to go for a week. And one time we did Yellowstone National Park. So we just, explored and looked at all the things there. One time we did Northern California and looked at the huge trees and the coast, and that was really fun. And then one time we just went down to Arkansas and floated on the river, explored the little towns. For me, I like a mixture. I like there to be towns. So Luke's full-blown, all nature, all hiking, all outdoor stuff. I'm fine with that. But then I want to be able to go to a nice little restaurant at the end of the day and have somewhere nice to stay. So it would have to be the two of those mixed together. We could also both really enjoy exploring cities together. I think both of us would find that very interesting. I know we would. Even though he likes outdoor things, we would find exploring different cities fun too, especially without kids, because that's obviously pretty stressful with kids. So we'd have to find something that blends all of that together. If we had 2 full weeks, that'd be a lot of time. Honestly, I'd probably miss home in that amount of time. I think we only need 1 week, but that won't be on the table until after this build's done for sure. But then possibly we could do that. Okay, another build question. New build question. We may build in the near future, and like you, I love the old-fashioned look of houses, and I do wish to build a new old house as well. I've thought about a lot of little details, one being whether or not to have an exhaust above our oven/range. I like the purpose of it, of course, but I do not like the look. Have you thought about this? Any good ideas on how to hide the range hood, perhaps with a wooden mantle or anything else? I do not like the huge exposed range hood you see in a lot of modern houses. Would love to hear your ideas, or if you're going to have a vent hood. So this has been, well, honestly, it's something I didn't give a ton of thought to. I kind of did like some Googling and then decided that we should probably have one, which is interesting because I currently live in a house that has a gas stove with no venting whatsoever. Our previous house was a gas stove with no venting whatsoever. When you Google it, that is very bad. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I mean, it's technically bad, but then we've also never had one. And it's, I mean, I guess fine. I don't know if there's long-term consequences. If you Google it, it will tell you that is not good for your air. Now, one thing I thought of is we are building a brand new house, and brand new houses are secure and airtight. You don't have drafts coming in under the windows on a windy day or under the front door. All that stuff in this house and my last house was the case. We didn't have and don't have currently an airtight house. I honestly prefer that, but I don't think that you go into a new build planning to make it not airtight. Like I don't think the goal is, hey, let's just give this a few gaps and, put a little inch here and an inch there so that way it doesn't seal properly. I don't think that's what you do. So inherently with a new house, we are going to have a tighter, it's going to be a new house with new insulation and new, yes, the doors are old, but you can buy any size door and put it into a new frame with new hardware, and it's essentially a new door because it fits properly and the house hasn't settled and moved, and so it will be tighter. So with all that being said, I could see the case being made that, yes, it wasn't a problem for you in your last 2 houses that were both well over 100 years old, whereas in this house, it might look old, but it is not old, and therefore it won't be drafty. Now, still, I am the type of person that doesn't love, I like climate control. I like having it warm in the winter, and I like AC in June, July, August. But when right now, it's May, and all morning we had our back door propped wide open. So any cooking I did, there was a literal entire door open. And I'm more of the type where I will hang one of those sticky fly tapes in my kitchen and have flies come in and stick to that versus leaving everything shut tight. I would much rather have the morning breeze coming into my house and feel that, and have open windows with no screens on them, no screen on the door. It's just wide open. Have kids kind of going in and out into fenced-in areas, the dog going in and out. I would much rather have that and then deal with the pests that happen with that. Like there's a cat in the house, and then, there's flies in there. I am that type of person. So I know even in our new build, The windows will be open during May, probably during June. Now, when it's cool at night, we'll open those windows. And then if, it's hot during the day, we'll shut them and turn on the air conditioning. So there's a little bit of both going on there. But this house and my new house won't be shut down tight for 12 months of the year. There will be airflow. But even still, during the winter months when we're baking more and, it's cold outside, I won't be opening the windows, I can see the case for why you would have a vent hood. I had the same resistance as you. I don't like them. I think that they are mostly just really ugly. I don't know how to, I know that there's beautiful options, but to me, they still don't have that charming historic look. We are doing one, and it has a shape that I feel is the least offensive. It'll have cabinetry around it. I hope that we still have an unfitted kitchen look enough, even though there are some built-in pieces like the vent hood and the cabinets around it. But then we'll have more of a table in the middle as opposed to an island. We have a hutch on one side. So it's kind of the mix of both. Just like our last house, we had some built-in cabinetry that was not standalone or unfitted looking. And then we also had some pieces that had that more unfitted look, which I think that's what you and I are struggling with the vent hood is, if you want that unfitted look, you're not really getting that with a vent hood. So this is one of those areas where we're doing one. I maybe don't love how that part of the house looks, but also I can see why it would be good to turn that on when the house is super locked down tight and I'm baking and cooking on that gas top. Now, we are also doing a wood cook stove. A lot of you suggested this because we have a chimney on the kitchen side and we were planning to do a wood stove in there. But some of you brought up the idea of a wood cooking stove. And I ended up finding someone to partner with on this, which I'm super excited about. I'm partnering with Thornhill Ranges. So they make a style of cooker that looks kind of like the Aga, except for one portion of it has a wood fire in it. And so you still have the cozy glow of the flame, but then the other three are ovens and cooktops. Now, I'm not 100% sure what one would do if that was all that they had. I know some people in certain parts of the world use those year round because just like the Aga, you get it going and then you you can turn it off and it comes to temperature faster than the Aga. That was kind of the selling point for me. But it's powered by wood. And so I know that during the winter, we'll want to keep that thing going all the time just to heat the house. And then we'll also cook on it. So I'm not 100% sure if we'll use the other range at all during the winter. It's one of those things like you kind of think in your head, we'll do it this way. All summer, we'll use the regular range. All winter, we will use the wood-fired one. It might be a combination of both. I could see one day we just don't have a wood fire going for whatever reason, and then we go to use the regular range. So kind of trying to figure that out in my head. At first I was like, well, why would we have two ranges? But then everybody that I looked online, I was looking at different kitchens that had a wood cook stove. They usually seem to have another stove for the summer months. And with such a large family, and then my daughter and I, we both cook nonstop. I was thinking maybe in the winter we'll just use both and then we'll retire the wood cook stove for the summer. I'm excited about the possibilities. I'm not 100% sure how it will work, but we are doing the range hood for the main gas range, if you will. Okay, so on a non-building question, have you gotten pregnant in the past when you're still nursing? I'm curious if so, what your approach is with the baby who is nursing. Also curious, what is your closest age gap with kiddos? So I've gotten pregnant while nursing probably 6 times, I believe, something like that. I think obviously I wasn't with my first, and then I think I wasn't with one other. So maybe I've gotten pregnant even more than that while nursing because I've been pregnant 10 times. I had 1 miscarriage. So yeah, maybe 8 times. So to answer your question, I almost always get pregnant while nursing. I usually will lose the milk supply somewhere around 12 to 20 weeks. There's just nothing. I found out this time around because I was still nursing my baby. And then Luke and I had the opportunity to go on a trip with the ad company that puts ads on my blog in February when I was 8 weeks, I believe, or January. I know I was around 8 weeks pregnant when we were there. And I didn't bring a pump. And I thought, well, we'll see how this goes because he still nurses a lot. So I might be kind of shooting myself in the foot here with bringing no pump. And I had nothing, like no engorgement at all. And so I realized like I'm definitely not producing milk anymore, even though he still nurses, which is common. Babies will just keep nursing even when there's no milk coming out. I've had that happen with many of my other kids as well. So for me, I've never been able to tandem nurse as soon as I'm pregnant. My body's just kind of like, okay, we're moving on to the next one, which is sad. I agree. But it also is what my body does. I do end up getting pregnant. Now, I don't end up getting pregnant super fast. I know some people get pregnant when their baby is 4 months or 6 months. My babies are usually 2 years, even sometimes a little bit more than 2 years. My closest age gap of all is, I believe, 21 months. So I've never actually gotten pregnant any sooner than that. This time around, they will be around 26 months apart. So just a little over 2 years apart. So even though my milk supply does end up drying up during pregnancy, I'm still usually able to nurse to that 18-month mark with, before being pregnant enough to cause the milk supply to drop. So that's just how it's worked out. Now, it's always been very easy for me to wean. I know some kids, it's a really big deal. All of my kids, they are usually around the age when my milk supply dries up, that they really have not necessarily lost interest, but they don't care as much anymore. And it's not a big deal. It's not like it's just kind of like, I just don't offer it at this time. And then it just gets less and less. And then it's never like a big, hard thing to do. Okay, I get some form of this question all the time. How do you let the difficulty of getting through the baby stage prevent you from desiring more children? With 3 already, we like the idea of a large family, but my husband especially is having a hard time getting over the idea of doing that again and again. We try to put it in perspective and remember that everything is just a stage, which you do so well, but through that first year plus, that sometimes seems so hard for us. It seems like some large families magically just have more patience than everyone else, or maybe it's just not hard for you since you've done it so many times. So, okay, in some ways, it is less hard when you've done it so many times because there are so many things that you're like, that's no big deal. Like, it used to be a big deal. I was so fixated on whether it was the sleeping schedule or how to feed the baby or where the baby would sleep. And now you just are like, it's fine. Like after, this certain amount of time, that'll all be fine anyways. That is not to say there aren't parts of it that every time after I have a baby, I'm like, whew, okay, back in this, because you get a little break. Like right now, I'm in a very easier season of life. Now, does it feel easy? No, it never does. No matter what season you're in, it always feels like there's a ton going on. You have a lot of obligations, a lot of people to feed, laundry to do, house to clean, all this kind of stuff. But then you have the baby, and then that's one more thing to do. But it is so interesting how fast you acclimate to what is your new stage of life. And you remember, okay, this is what you do when you have a newborn. That's right. Like now I don't sleep through the night anymore. But I know I will, and it'll be short, and I will have these children after that. And so it seems like a minimal inconvenience for the long-term benefit, if you will. So I do think with that perspective, you think, I can get through this, even though there are challenging parts about having a baby, that life, is a little bit easier and more predictable in times when you don't have a baby, because babies need to nap. Babies don't sleep through the night. Babies need what they need when they need it, and they don't care if you have something else going on. I figured out things to do, like baby wearing. I can still get the things done that I need to because the baby will go in the wrap. And we have a large family. So I remember the first kid I really noticed this with was our last baby. I had at least 4 or 5 kids that could sit in the kitchen with me and hold the baby while I would do certain things. And so that, of course, does change. That's something that you have when you have a lot of older kids. It's not even just like this one kid is always holding the baby. I can have my 10-year-old son hold the baby while I'm making dinner. I can have my 7-year-old son hold the baby while making dinner. And so there just are a lot of hands that come together to get everything done. My husband is helpful. I have a lot of support just within our family. So that helps a ton. But I think you do get used to the process. You understand that, like in my case, the way that we do sleeping, I always have about a year of when I have a baby and then all the way until we get their sleep kind of figured out, which I do the same thing every time. A year of very interrupted sleep and then a year where I'm kind of off and then a year, it's just more of the same. I think we think of having a lot of children as like exponentially harder, but each baby it's just the same thing you've done, only again. So it's something that you get used to that process. You understand what it's going to require of you, and you are more able to just deal with the inconveniences of a baby better the more times that you've done it. Another sort of along those lines, I have 3 kids, 4 years old and younger. In a perfect world, I'd love to have 4 kids, but we are so utterly overwhelmed right now that it feels crazy to throw one more in the mix. You've obviously done it, so I guess I'm just looking for encouragement. We don't live near family either, and I do stay home full time. I'd hate to be done because we're so overwhelmed and then regret not having more when I'm older. So one thing I would say is you don't have to make this huge decision right now. This is something that in 1 year, you might feel so much better equipped to handle. I've seen it so many times when somebody has 3 children. It's something about the 3rd child. There's just something about it. Like it's the first time that life can really feel chaotic. And I'm not saying like 2 kids can't sometimes, but for the most part, it can't get to a level of chaos with 2 kids. Like they could both need something at the same time, but that's literally the most that could happen. 3 is when you kind of get to that spot and your mind's like blown because you can't meet everybody's needs at one time. And I do think over time you get more used to being able to understand that not everybody, it's okay if you can't meet everybody's needs right now, all the time, and that things can wait. I think that does happen. But 3 is that number where you're just coming off of where you could sort of control and manage everything. Now it feels kind of out of control, and you're wondering if it's just going to get more and more out of control the more kids you have. And so you're in this season of, in your mind, just so overwhelmed. And I think we forget that it'll change so fast. Like in 1 year, you might be a completely different kind of overwhelmed. And so maybe your brain just needs like a year or whatever it might be. Don't think that this is how you're going to always feel, I guess is what I'm saying. Now, I kind of just kept going with it because even if when my oldest was 4 to 0, I wouldn't have gotten pregnant again for another year or so after that. So yeah, I think you just need a little time. I think maybe you're in a particularly overwhelming season and you're forgetting that changes, because it does. It just changes all the time. Like a year ago right now, let's see, Victor wasn't sleeping through the night. I was probably thinking, how am I ever going to get this kid to sleep through the night? And I was probably like approaching this conversation fully differently than I am right now, because I was in a more overwhelming season than I am right now. And now I'm like, it's fine. Everything's fine, because, and I still haven't had the next child yet. I'll deal with that when that happens. And so I think just you're thinking that it's always going to be this level of chaos when it's not.
When Luke and I were first married 17 years ago, we were on a super tight budget, and the only way that I could decorate my home and make it my own cozy space was by doing a lot of DIY and sewing. I've shared that for years on my YouTube channel, on this podcast, on my blog, and recently I put all of those resources together, all of the patterns, the tutorials, and then step-by-step instructions from getting a machine and threading it learning about tension issues in the bobbin, all those things maybe over the years that have scared you away from sewing, into one course that I've called the Simple Sewing Series. If you've wanted to sew but have been intimidated by the process of getting started, or even if you're a more seasoned seamstress or sewist and you want to improve your skills, I really think that this will be a great resource for you. There's also a private community associated with it, so if you have sewing questions or you're excited to meet other people who are also getting started on their sewing journey, that's available with the course as well, and it's for a very affordable price. You can find my new course and all of the resources that go along with it over at bit.ly/simple sewing course. That's bit.ly/simple sewing course, all lowercase. That's where you can find more info and become a student.
Oh, this is an interesting one. I'm 41, expecting again, my 5th. What goes into deciding if home birth is an option? Do they check for placenta position, cord abnormalities, etc.? Have you ever had any complications? I'm 41, expecting my 5th September, and I'm genuinely curious. So your history is going to go into it a ton. What have you dealt with in the past? Have you had any complications? That would be very pertinent information for your midwife. So if you've had 4 C-sections, that would be something they'd want to know. Most likely, most midwives would tell you that they're not going to deliver the 5th at home. Have you had 4 very uncomplicated births? Have you had, there are just so many things that could have happened in your first 4 that would tell you. And then do they check for things? So it really just depends on your comfort level. I've had pregnancies where we check for nothing. There usually will be symptoms throughout the pregnancy that something isn't right, whether it's the growth of the baby by measuring, by feeling. The midwives are usually very skilled in feeling if the baby is growing appropriately. As far as placenta position goes, this is probably one of the biggest cases I've seen made for ultrasound, and one of the main reasons I've chosen to do ultrasound in some of my pregnancies. Now, that is not to say that I think it's necessarily reckless to not do it, because if you talk to many midwives, they will tell you that there are usually symptoms associated with having a low-lying placenta. So, of course, you do not want the placenta to come out first. That is one of the biggest risks in birth. And so if it makes you feel better, which it does me, to determine the position of the placenta, when I get an ultrasound, that is usually the number one thing my midwife is concerned with. I'm thinking about just, seeing all the different parts and boy, girl, all this kind of stuff, making sure everything looks good. Her main concern is the placenta. Now, of course, there are other things to look for as well, but that is what they find the useful information. Now, they can also determine where a placenta is with pretty decent accuracy by using a fetoscope or a Doppler. The sounds of the placenta are apparent to a midwife. I think people do also forget just how skilled a midwife is in preventative things. So in finding things that could make you not a candidate for home birth, and they want this to go well. They want your baby and you to be healthy at the end of it. And so they're very good at assessing risk. They've seen a lot of times hundreds of births, have a lot of history in their own, personal practice that they've seen to determine whether or not you're a good candidate. So I would say talk to a qualified midwife, and I think you'll feel a little bit more confident. I do think people think a lot of times that having a home birth means you're just going at it alone, having a free birth. That's not the case. Some people choose to do that, but having a midwife is having a medical professional there. It's not like you are just throwing all caution to the wind, just birth always goes well. I know it. There's nothing that can go wrong. I don't believe that. So I think having someone who is qualified and skilled, which some people educate themselves so diligently that they assess that on their own and they do a free birth. Some people prefer to have someone else do that, or a combination of the two. I'd find myself more in that camp. Like, I kind of have my own history. I have my own research. I also have the midwife. I've talked to other midwives. And so I kind of use a combination of all of that to determine if I'm a candidate. Now, I also have good history. So I've never had any complications in birth. I've had 2 children that have had what's called a true knot in their cord, but that isn't necessarily an emergency type of situation. It wasn't in both cases that I had that. That's like the only thing I have in my history, which again, isn't an emergency, but it is something to, for if a midwife could know that, they would like to know that because they notice some decelerations during labor, during pushing when a cord is in a true knot. So it's just another thing that they can assess during labor. So if in those cases where I had those true knots, if the baby would have been showing any signs of distress, that is monitored throughout labor, and we would likely do a transfer if there was a problem there. But as of now, there haven't been any scary things happen during labor and birth that have threatened a transfer. I did in my last labor or in my last birth lose a little bit more blood than my midwife wanted to see. And so she did give me some Pitocin. That's something they carry with them to stop excessive bleeding. But it was never like a threatening, like, okay, we're going to have to get to the hospital right now type of situation. If it gets to that point, you make arrangements ahead of time on where you will go and how you would handle an emergency. So hasn't happened at this time, but always something to keep in mind, which is why I do hire a midwife, because I know things can arise during birth. Now, there are plenty of things that you can do ahead of time to determine your likelihood of that, and that's sort of the job of the prenatal care. But then there are things that can happen that you didn't predict, and monitoring and assessing the situation during labor is important. Okay, which pregnancy was your hardest? I'm having my hardest pregnancy with baby number 3. I'm 31, and so many people have told me that baby number 3 is the hardest pregnancy, including 2 midwives and a mom of 10, wondering if one of your pregnancies stands out as especially challenging. If it is, it wouldn't be baby number 3. Not that, that's just one opinion. I'm sure maybe on the whole, baby number 3 is the hardest pregnancy. I think I was the most nauseated with my second, but I also was pregnant with her 15 years ago. And so I sometimes am like, was I? Or, I don't know if I even remember it right. But as far as I remember, I couldn't eat like any normal food. I had to get something certain during the whole first trimester. I don't remember having any breaks in how I felt. Whereas with other pregnancies, I feel mostly bad from about 6 weeks to 14, but then there's several days in there where I'm just totally fine. Like, where's my symptoms? Didn't have that with her. So I think that was my hardest, but nothing stands out as exceptionally hard pregnancy. I actually have had pretty easy pregnancies, I have to say, so far. And honestly, for me, even the 3rd trimester is pretty easy. What's hard for me is only the 1st trimester, and it's a struggle. Like every single time, I just feel unmotivated. I feel tired. I feel nauseous. And that hasn't changed with any of them. I do think that with my second, I was more of that, but they're always, this one too, it's just that 6 to 14 weeks, I just don't feel good. I don't like it, but I can pretty much handle the rest of it pretty well. And nothing stands out as much worse than the others, but I don't think you're outside of the realm of normal for you to have that. I know people who have had excellent pregnancies and terrible pregnancies, and then excellent ones again. Same person, same dietary habits. One pregnancy is like this, and the next one's great, the next one's terrible, and sometimes we can't figure it all out. I was in a Facebook group. I like to hang around in some of these like pro-metabolic Facebook groups and just see the discussion. I find it interesting to see the things that people are, talking about. And one of the things I saw was, why does it seem like some people who do everything perfectly still have these terrible pregnancies, or, XYZ, you could just name anything that could happen to a person medically that you expect it not to based on the life that they're living. And there's just some things that just aren't explainable. They're just not. And because some people will be in that group and they'll say, I had a terrible first pregnancy. I did XYZ, and now I'm having the best pregnancy. And I'm not saying you can't influence things. I'm not saying that. But I think to always attribute it to just like, I drank this certain thing, I took this certain vitamin and then that just is always going to solve it no matter what. I think have several more children and you might see that sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. Like I know people who do everything they don't do it perfect because nobody does it perfect, but they mostly live like the kind of lifestyle that you would expect would make it to where there wouldn't be any trouble, and then there is. On top of having some difficulties, then also feeling like, I could have controlled this. Not saying there aren't things you can do, because there are. Like, I'm not saying that you shouldn't try and that there aren't certain dietary things to do and lifestyle things to do to help. But sometimes I don't think you can pinpoint why one was terrible and one wasn't. We have guesses. I do that. I make guesses as to, it was probably this. But then, I do it a few kids later and it's like, well, that didn't line up on that one. And I just don't know why. Sometimes there's probably always a reason. You just can't always figure it out. And I think sometimes we worry too much and overly try to figure everything out. And, sometimes it's good to get to the bottom of things. Like I've definitely advocated for myself and I have taken things and I have reversed them with certain practices, but it doesn't always work out that way. So I do think, and I know this is controversial and people will say this is not the case. I do think it's normal for first trimesters to be hard. I think that it's okay if it's hard. I don't think, there's something necessarily wrong with you if first trimesters are hard. They just are sometimes. They are for me. All right. Well, thank you all so much for submitting your questions. Currently, what's big in my life, which is what I currently have a lot of experience talking about, which is why a lot of you ask these questions, which is why I end up gravitating towards these questions because I have personal experience, house building and pregnancy. Soon to be some different design decisions as the house build progresses. At some point, birth will be a topic I'm probably talking more about. And then anything family related in the mix. That's always something going on. So you can submit your questions over at bit.ly/SFL questions. The SFL are capitalized and it is case sensitive. The rest is lowercase. We'll also leave that link down below as well as any resources I touched on will be linked in the show notes or the description box, depending on if you're watching this on YouTube or listening on a podcast player. If you do want to see the video version of this, it's just me sitting in a room talking. You can find that over on YouTube. Just search Simple Farmhouse Life.
Thanks, as always, for listening to the Simple Farmhouse Life podcast. My husband Luke and I and our 8 kids work together side by side on our little homestead and use our blog, podcast, and YouTube channel to reach other homemakers, home cooks, and homesteaders with practical recipes and daily family life. For everyday sourdough recipes, make sure to check out our blog, farmhouseonboone.com. And to dig deeper, we do also offer a course called Simple Sourdough over at bit.ly/farmhouse sourdough course. That's all one word, bit.ly/farmhouse sourdough course. If you're looking to learn how we earn an income online, check out my YouTube course at bit.ly/farmhouse YouTube course, all one word.